The sun began to rise over Tuskegee Army Airfield, gradually illuminating the sprawling expanse of the runway, the barracks, and the eager faces of young recruits. The golden rays reflected off the polished surfaces of a few aircraft already stationed, eager to take to the skies. Among the throng of fresh faces was Charles McGee, a young man with an unquenchable passion for flying. His heart raced as he watched the planes ascend, feeling the palpable energy of hope and ambition that enveloped the airfield. Charlie stood slightly apart from the group, his hands shoved into the pockets of his government-issued trousers. The weight of expectation hung heavy in the air, mixed with the excitement of the first day of flight training. He could feel the anticipation building in his chest. Today was not just another day. It was the beginning of a journey that he had dreamed of for as long as he could remember. As he gazed up at the sky, his mind raced with thoughts of soaring through the clouds, the wind rushing past him, and the thrill of maneuvering an aircraft. "Hey, McGee!" a voice called out, jolting him from his reverie. It was Benjamin "Ben" Davis, a spirited recruit known for his infectious enthusiasm. He approached, a wide grin plastered on his face. "You ready to show these guys what we're made of?" Charlie chuckled, the nerves in his stomach easing slightly. "If by showing them, you mean trying not to crash on our first day, then sure." He tried to sound nonchalant, but the truth was, the thought of flying made his heart race in both excitement and fear. "Come on. You know we're going to be the best pilots they've ever seen," Ben said, his eyes gleaming with determination. "We have to prove them wrong. Show them that we're just as good, if not better, than anyone else." Charlie nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie with Ben. They had both faced their share of skepticism growing up, and now they were here, standing on the precipice of history. "You're right. Let's do this." As they moved toward the assembly area, the mood shifted. The recruits gathered in a semicircle, awaiting instructions from their white instructors, whose faces were stern and unyielding. The tension was palpable as the recruits exchanged glances, acutely aware of the racial dynamics that loomed over them. Charlie felt a knot tighten in his stomach. It wasn't just the fear of flying. It was the fear of proving themselves in an environment that had long doubted their capabilities. "Listen up," barked one of the instructors, a tall man with a hardened expression that seemed etched into his features. "You're here because you've been chosen to train as pilots. Don't think for a second that you'll get any special treatment just because of your skin color. You'll have to work twice as hard to earn your place in the sky." A wave of murmurs rippled through the recruits. Charlie's heart sank. He exchanged a glance with Ben, who clenched his fists at his sides. The instructor's words were intended to intimidate, but they only fueled Charlie's resolve. He would not let prejudice define his journey. They would prove their worth through skill and determination. As training commenced, the recruits faced grueling physical exercises that tested their endurance and mental fortitude. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the air was thick with sweat and exertion. Racial slurs occasionally punctuated the air, hurled by those who still clung to outdated beliefs about capability and race. Charlie felt the sting of those words, but he channeled that anger into focus, reminding himself why he was there. "Charlie, don't let them get to you," Ben said during a break, wiping the sweat from his brow. "We're here because we belong here. We're going to show them we can fly just as well as anyone." "Yeah, I know," Charlie replied, pushing his frustration aside. "But it's hard to keep my head in the game when they're constantly throwing shade at us." Ben nodded, his expression serious. "We have to stick together. We're a team, and together we can achieve anything. Just think about what it would mean to fly in the skies, a black pilot leading the charge." The thought ignited a spark in Charlie. He could envision it. A squadron of black pilots soaring through the skies, their planes glinting in the sunlight as they executed flawless maneuvers. It was a dream worth fighting for. "You're right," he said, determination creeping into his voice. "We'll show them what we can do. We'll make our mark." As the days wore on, the rigorous training continued. The recruits faced not only physical challenges, but also the mental strain of battling against the ingrained prejudices of their instructors. Charlie and Ben formed a tight bond with a few other recruits, sharing their dreams and aspirations during breaks. They spoke of flying high above the clouds, of the honor that came with being a pilot, and the legacy they hoped to create. Finally, the day arrived for their first flight. The anticipation was electric, but so were the nerves. Charlie stood beside Ben, his heart racing as they suited up in their flight gear. The hum of the aircraft engines filled the air, and the sight of the planes lined up on the tarmac sent a thrill through him. "This is it," Ben said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our chance to show them we belong in the sky." Charlie took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. "Yeah, just remember the training. We've worked hard for this moment." As they approached the aircraft, Charlie's excitement mingled with trepidation. Climbing into the cockpit, he felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. The instructor's voice crackled through the radio, directing them with a mixture of impatience and skepticism. "McGee, you're up first. Let's see what you can do," the instructor commanded. Charlie nodded, determination flooding his veins. He grasped the controls, feeling the power of the aircraft beneath him. As the plane taxied down the runway, he could hear the roar of the engine, the vibrations reverberating through his body. With each passing second, his fear began to dissipate, replaced by exhilaration. "Take off in 3, 2, 1, the instructor shouted. With a surge of power, Charlie pulled back on the controls, and the aircraft lifted off the ground. The sensation of flying was indescribable, a blend of freedom and exhilaration that made him feel alive. He maneuvered the plane through the sky, the earth falling away beneath him. For a moment, all the doubts, the slurs, the challenges faded into the background. It was just him and the sky. "Look at him go!" Ben exclaimed from his own cockpit, his voice filled with excitement. "You're doing great, Charlie." The thrill of soaring through the clouds was intoxicating. Charlie banked left, then right, feeling the aircraft respond to his every command. He was no longer just a young black man from a segregated community. He was a pilot, a force to be reckoned with. As he completed a series of maneuvers, he could almost hear the cheers of his friends and family in his mind, urging him on. But as he landed and stepped out of the aircraft, the reality of their situation came crashing back. The instructors, arms crossed and faces set in disapproval, offered only a few curt nods of acknowledgement. The condescension was palpable, and for a brief moment, Charlie felt deflated. "Don't let them get to you," Ben said, clapping a hand on Charlie's shoulder. "We did it. We flew. That's what matters." Charlie took a deep breath, allowing the weight of disappointment to dissolve. "You're right. We'll rise above this. We have to excel, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who believes in us." With renewed determination, the group gathered, their spirits ignited. They pledged to support one another, to push through the challenges ahead, and to prove that they were more than capable of becoming America's secret weapon. Together, they would rise above the prejudice, fueled by their dreams and the unbreakable bond they had formed. The sky was no longer just a place of dreams. It was theirs to conquer. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the Tuskegee Army airfield, Charlie sat on the edge of his bunk, a letter crinkled in his hands. The familiar scent of paper mingled with the cold metal of the barracks, creating an atmosphere thick with emotion. His eyes scanned the lines for the umpteenth time, each word echoing with the struggles his family faced back home. The Jim Crow laws, harsh and unforgiving, had woven a tapestry of inequality that enveloped his loved ones. He could almost hear his mother's voice echoing through the pages, filled with the quiet strength that had always defined her. "Charlie," he murmured to himself, "this is why you fly." The letter spoke of his younger siblings being denied access to the local pool, of his father's job being threatened because he dared to demand fair wages. The injustices piled up, suffocating yet motivating. He crumpled the letter slightly in his fist, feeling the weight of his family's plight pressing down on him. He needed to do more than just train. He needed to fight for them, for all of them. Just then Ben walked in, his demeanor a mix of lightheartedness and camaraderie. "Hey, Charlie," "You look like someone just told you can't fly," he quipped, a grin breaking across his face. "What's got you so down?" Charlie looked up, the corners of his mouth twitching into a smile despite his somber mood. "It's just this letter from home. It's tough for them, Ben. I mean, really tough." Ben's expression shifted, his playful demeanor replaced by a grave understanding. "You know my family's been struggling too. My dad was laid off because he spoke up about those unfair wages. It's crazy out there, man." He paused, his brows furrowing as he placed a hand on Charlie's shoulder. "But that's why we're here, right? To show them we're worth something. We're not just pilots. We're a part of something bigger." Charlie nodded, feeling the fire rekindle within him. "You're right. We're fighting for more than just medals. We're fighting for respect for our families. Let's make sure they know we're not just here to fly. We're here to win." As the days progressed, the excitement of their first deployment loomed just around the corner, a mix of exhilaration and trepidation coursing through the airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen were to protect bombers on their missions, a crucial responsibility that came with its own set of fears and doubts. Charlie could feel the weight of expectations on his shoulders, not just from military command, but from himself and his fellow pilots. They had trained hard, but this was different. This was war. The day before their first mission, the atmosphere in the barracks was electric. Men paced, voices mingling in hushed tones as they discussed their strategies and the likelihood of success. Amidst the clamor, Charlie stood by the window, watching the planes glide gracefully across the runway. He felt a mixture of pride and anxiety, the reality of what they were about to undertake settling heavily in his heart. "Hey!" Earth to Charlie, Ben called out, breaking his trance. "You ready for this?" Charlie turned, forcing a smile. "I guess as ready as I'll ever be. Just thinking about how we'll be received. You know how some pilots look at us." Ben shrugged, his usual bravado shining through. "Let them doubt. We'll show them what we're made of. Just stick to the plan and we'll be fine. Besides, it's not like we haven't faced worse, right?" "Right," Charlie replied, feeling the camaraderie bolster his resolve. "Let's make them remember us." The next morning, as dawn broke, they gathered on the tarmac, the roar of engines filling the air with a symphony of both fear and excitement. Charlie stood with Ben, the rest of their squadron forming a tight circle around their commanding officer. He felt a rush of adrenaline course through him as the briefing began. The stakes were high, and the eyes of everyone rested on them. "Gentlemen, today we fly into combat," their commander announced, voice steady and authoritative. "Your mission is to escort the bombers. Stay close, watch each other's backs, and remember your training. You are the future of this Air Force. Prove them wrong." As the briefing concluded, Charlie exchanged a tense glance with Ben. "We're doing this," Ben affirmed, determination etched on his face. No turning back now. The engines roared to life, and soon they were airborne, the ground falling away beneath them. The sensation was intoxicating. The weightlessness of flight combined with the thrill of their mission filled Charlie with a sense of purpose. He maneuvered the aircraft, his instincts kicking in as he adjusted to the rhythms of the sky. "Charlie, you're leading us into the fray." Ben's voice crackled over the radio, filled with excitement. "Let's show them what we're made of." As they approached the bomber formation, the sight was awe-inspiring yet terrifying. Rows of massive planes lumbered through the clouds, their vulnerability laid bare. Charlie's heart raced as he took his position, scanning the skies for any sign of enemy aircraft. The anticipation was palpable, a storm brewing in the heavens above. Suddenly, chaos erupted as German fighters appeared, swooping down like hawks upon their prey. "Here we go," Charlie shouted, adrenaline surging through him. "Stay sharp, everyone." The fight was brutal and unforgiving. Bullets whizzed past, and explosions erupted around them. Charlie flew with precision, his instincts guiding him through the chaos. He could feel the camaraderie among the squadron, their trust in each other solidifying with every maneuver. "Cover me!" Ben's voice rang out as he dove to engage an enemy fighter. Charlie's heart raced as he maneuvered his plane, positioning himself to shield his friend. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into an eternity. "Got your back, Ben. Take him out." Charlie shouted, his focus razor-sharp. With a crackle of gunfire, Ben engaged the enemy, and Charlie held his breath, praying for victory. The sky filled with smoke and fire, and for a moment, time stood still. In the end, their teamwork prevailed. They fought valiantly, and as the last enemy fighter fell away, a roar of triumph erupted over the radio. "Did we just do that?" Ben exclaimed, his excitement palpable. "Hell yeah, we did," Charlie replied, a grin breaking across his face as the adrenaline began to ebb. They had proven themselves, not just to their critics but to each other. Back at base, the airmen were met with cheers and applause, their first mission a resounding success. Yet, amidst the celebration, Charlie couldn't shake the nagging doubt that lingered in the air. Whispers of skepticism still clung to the higher-ups, and he could sense the tension bubbling beneath the surface. The victory felt bittersweet, as if it was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Not just against the enemy in the skies, but against the prejudice that still haunted them on the ground. As the night wore on, Charlie gathered with Ben and the rest of the squadron, their spirits high despite the underlying tension. They shared stories of the day, laughter mingling with the shadows of doubt that loomed overhead. "Can you believe they still doubt us?" Ben said, shaking his head incredulously. "What more do we have to do to prove we belong here?" Charlie took a deep breath, his thoughts echoing the sentiment. "Sometimes it feels like we're fighting two wars, Ben, one in the air and one down here. But we'll keep proving them wrong one mission at a time." "Together," Ben affirmed, clapping Charlie on the back. "We're in this together." Strengthened by their bond and the shared struggles ahead, the airmen prepared for whatever challenges awaited them, their resolve unyielding. They were not just pilots. They were a brotherhood, ready to soar into the unknown. As the war raged on, the Tuskegee Airmen found themselves grappling with the complexities of their dual existence. In the brief moments of respite between missions, Captain Charles McGee often found himself lost in thought. The skies were a battleground not only against enemy aircraft, but also against the oppressive weight of racial discrimination that followed them like a shadow. He stood on the edge of the airfield one afternoon, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the vibrant colors of orange and purple transforming into a dark canvas. It was a beautiful sight, yet it felt tainted by the realities of their fight. "Charlie!" A voice broke through his reverie, pulling him back to the present. It was Benjamin "Ben" Davis, his closest friend and ally. "You all right, man?" Charlie turned to face Ben, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about everything. This war, our place in it, it's a lot to carry." Ben nodded, his expression serious. "I get it. We're out here risking our lives for a country that doesn't even see us as equals. It's frustrating." "Frustrating doesn't begin to cover it," Charlie replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But we can't forget why we're doing this. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for our families, for our communities. We're proving that we can do this." Ben placed a hand on Charlie's shoulder, his grip firm. "You're right. We have to keep pushing forward. It's not just about flying. It's about breaking down these barriers. We owe it to those who came before us." As they spoke, the weight of their mission settled heavily on Charlie's heart. The loss of their squadron member, Lieutenant Harold "Red" Johnson, still lingered in the air like an unshakable fog. Red had been more than just a comrade. He was a brother, full of life and laughter, whose absence left a chasm in their ranks that was hard to fill. The squadron had gone through the motions of mourning, but the raw emotions of grief and anger simmered just beneath the surface. "Have you spoken to the others?" Charlie asked, glancing toward the barracks where the rest of the squadron gathered. Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not really. Everyone's on edge. I think we all feel the weight of what happened. It's hard to focus when you're still processing that loss. I'll talk to them." Charlie decided, his jaw set with determination. We can't let this tear us apart. Red wouldn't want that. That evening, Charlie called for a meeting in the mess hall. The atmosphere was somber as his fellow airmen gathered, their faces etched with sorrow. He stood at the head of the long table, the flickering overhead lights casting shadows that danced across their features. Gentlemen, he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. I know we're all hurting right now. Red was one of us, and losing him is something we'll carry for the rest of our lives. But we need to remember why we're here. We're not just pilots. We're a unit. We're fighting for a cause greater than ourselves. A murmur of agreement swept through the room, though the tension remained palpable. We have to honor Red's memory, Charlie continued. By showing up for one another, we need to be stronger together than we are apart. We owe it to him and to ourselves. Charlie's right, Ben interjected, his voice rising above the quiet murmurs. Red wouldn't want us to wallow in despair. He'd want us to fly, to fight, and to prove that we belong here. One of the younger pilots, Private Lewis, spoke up hesitantly. But how can we? How do we keep going when it feels like the world is against us? Charlie took a deep breath, searching for the right words. By not letting fear dictate our actions, by flying with purpose and courage, we've faced down enemy fire, and we've fought for respect. We're not just fighting for our lives in the sky. We're fighting for our dignity on the ground. That's what makes us strong. The room fell silent as his words hung in the air. Slowly, heads began to nod, and Charlie felt a sense of resolve growing among them. It was a small flicker of hope in the midst of their grief, but it was enough to kindle a fire. As the meeting drew to a close, they all agreed to honor Red's memory by pulling together as a team. They would push through the pain, not only for themselves, but as a tribute to their fallen comrade. The camaraderie that had been tested by sorrow was now fortified by a shared purpose. The next day, after a rigorous training session, the airmen received commendations for their bravery in previous missions. The accolades were intended to boost morale, but as they stood in formation, Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that it was a hollow gesture. The applause from their superiors felt overshadowed by the persistent racial discrimination they faced, both on and off the base. Congratulations, gentlemen, the commanding officer praised, his words echoing through the air. You've proven yourselves time and again. The war effort relies on pilots like you. As the officer spoke, Charlie noticed a group of white pilots lingering nearby, their skeptical glances directed at the Tuskegee Airmen. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a familiar frustration bubbling to the surface. Let's not get too comfortable, Ben muttered under his breath, sharing Charlie's sentiment. They'll find a way to undermine us, just watch. After the ceremony, Charlie and Ben approached the other pilots, determined to break the barriers that remained. Hey! Charlie called out, forcing a casual tone. We appreciate the recognition. It means a lot. One of the pilots, Lieutenant Smith, crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. Sure, it's nice to get a round of applause. Just remember, it's a long way to the top. Don't get too cocky. Ben's eyes narrowed, but Charlie stepped in before the tension escalated. We're not here to boast. We're here to do a job, just like you. The conversation hung in the air, thick with unspoken challenges. Charlie could feel the weight of their prejudices, the doubts that surrounded them like a storm cloud. He knew they had to prove themselves time and again, not just to their superiors, but to those who refused to see them as equals. Later that evening, as Charlie prepared for their next mission, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The skies were treacherous, and the stakes were higher than ever. They were to be reassigned under a new commander, a colonel whose reputation preceded him, a reputation that didn't bode well for the Tuskegee Airmen. What do you think he'll be like? Ben asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I'm not sure, Charlie admitted, glancing at the flight roster. But we can't let anyone undermine us. We've come too far to let prejudices dictate our worth. The night before their first mission under the new command, Charlie gathered his squadron for one last pep talk. The camaraderie they had built over the last few weeks was palpable, the resolve in their eyes shining bright. "We've faced challenges before," Charlie said, his voice steady, "and we've come out stronger. No matter what happens tomorrow, remember why we're here. We fight for each other. We fly for each other. That's what makes us a unit." The airmen nodded, their spirits lifted as they prepared for the trials ahead. They would face whatever came their way, united in purpose and brotherhood, determined to prove that they were not just pilots, but warriors fighting for their legacy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the mood at the Tuskegee Army airfield grew tense. The airmen gathered in the briefing room, their expressions a mix of determination and anxiety. Charlie McGee stood at the front, his hands resting on a map of the mission area. The stakes had never been higher, and he could feel the weight of it pressing down on his shoulders. "Listen up, everyone," Charlie called out, his voice steady despite the apprehension swirling around the room. "Tomorrow, we're flying into the thick of it. We've trained hard, and we know what we're capable of. Let's show them what Tuskegee Airmen can do." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, but Charlie could also sense the underlying tension. This mission was unlike any they had faced before, a high-risk operation that required precision and bravery in equal measure. He glanced at Ben Davis, who nodded back, his face a mask of focus. They had come a long way from their first days of training, but the journey was far from over. Later that night, as the stars twinkled overhead, Charlie and Ben found a quiet spot beneath the vast sky. The sounds of their fellow airmen preparing for the next day faded into the background as they shared a moment of reflection. The weight of their experiences hung heavy in the air. "Do you remember when we first got here?" Ben asked, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "We were just a bunch of kids with dreams, facing all that doubt." Charlie chuckled softly, recalling their naive optimism. "Yeah, I remember thinking that if I could just get into the cockpit, everything would be fine. But it's so much more than that, isn't it? We're fighting for our country, but also for our people." Ben's expression grew serious. "It's why we can't fail. This mission, it's not just another flight. It's a chance to change minds, to show them that we belong here." As they discussed the challenges ahead, Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He trusted his men, but whispers of betrayal had begun to circulate in the air. The thought gnawed at him, creating an undercurrent of unease. He pushed it aside for now. They had a mission to focus on. The next morning, dawn broke with a chilling clarity. The airmen gathered for a final briefing, their faces taut with resolve. Charlie reviewed the plan, his voice unwavering as he outlined their objectives. "We'll escort the bombers through enemy territory. Stay sharp, stay together, and trust each other. We've got this." As they suited up and prepared their planes, Charlie caught sight of a familiar figure lingering at the edge of the tarmac. It was their squadron member, Marcus, who had been acting strangely in the days leading up to this mission. Charlie felt a knot tighten in his stomach, but chose to ignore it for now. They had a job to do. The roar of engines filled the air as the pilots climbed into their cockpits. Charlie took a deep breath, reminding himself of the countless hours of training that had brought them to this moment. As they took off, the ground fell away, and he felt the familiar thrill of flight wash over him. This was where he belonged. However, as they approached the designated area, the atmosphere shifted. The sky darkened with enemy fighters, and the tension in the cockpit was palpable. Charlie's heart raced as he scanned the horizon, his instincts kicking in. "Form up, everyone. Keep your eyes peeled." The first wave of enemy planes descended upon them, and chaos erupted. Bullets flew, and the air was filled with the sounds of engines roaring and the crackle of gunfire. Charlie's training kicked in as he maneuvered his aircraft with precision, dodging incoming fire while keeping his squadron in formation. "Charlie, watch your six," Ben shouted over the radio, his voice cutting through the chaos. Charlie glanced in his rearview mirror just in time to see an enemy fighter closing in. He executed a sharp turn, narrowly evading the attack. "Thanks, Ben." "Let's show them what we're made of," Charlie replied, adrenaline surging through him. He pushed his aircraft to its limits. Feeling the rush of speed and the weight of responsibility, his squadron relied on him, and he wasn't about to let them down. The battle raged on, and amidst the chaos, Charlie's leadership shone. He led his team in a series of strategic maneuvers, countering the enemy's advances. They fought fiercely, their camaraderie evident as they communicated seamlessly through the radio, each pilot covering the other's blind spots. But just as victory seemed within reach, a sudden ambush took them by surprise. A squadron of enemy fighters, hidden until now, swooped down from above, raining fire upon the Tuskegee Airmen. The atmosphere shifted from exhilaration to panic in an instant. "Break formation! Break! Break!" Charlie yelled. His voice strained with urgency. He watched as his men scattered, trying to evade the onslaught of bullets. The sky exploded around them, and Charlie's heart sank as he witnessed one of his closest friends, Marcus, take a hit. "Marcus, get out of there!" Charlie shouted, his voice laced with desperation. But it was too late. Marcus's plane spiraled downwards, flames trailing behind it. Charlie felt a cold wave wash over him, but there was no time to grieve. They had to escape. With instinct honed by countless hours of training, Charlie led the remaining airmen in a daring escape. They weaved and dodged, the enemy in hot pursuit. The chaos of the battlefield blurred around them, but Charlie's focus remained sharp. He could not let fear take over. As they finally broke free from the ambush, the airmen regrouped, hearts pounding and minds racing. They had survived, but the cost weighed heavily on them. Charlie scanned the skies, counting heads. His heart sank further when he realized Marcus was missing. Back at the airfield, the mood was somber despite the victory. As Charlie and his men stepped out of their planes, they were met with cheers and applause, but the joy felt hollow. They had lost one of their own, and the reality of war had struck hard. "Charlie, we did it," Ben exclaimed, trying to lift the spirits of the group. But Charlie could only nod, his mind consumed by thoughts of Marcus. "Yeah, but at what cost?" As they gathered for a debriefing, accolades poured in from their superiors. The airmen were recognized for their bravery and skill, but Charlie couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Something wasn't right. He exchanged glances with Ben, who seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere as well. Whispers of betrayal floated through the ranks, and Charlie's instincts told him to investigate. He needed to know if there was more to this mission than met the eye. As he watched his comrades celebrate, he felt a swell of determination. They had fought too hard to let whispers of treachery undermine their efforts. "Ben, we need to talk," Charlie said, pulling his friend aside. "There's something off about this whole situation. We lost Marcus, and now I'm hearing things." "I know," Ben replied, his brows furrowing in concern. "We can't let this distract us, but we need to stay vigilant. If there's a leak, we need to find out who it is." Charlie nodded, his resolve strengthening. They had faced down enemy fighters, but now they had to confront a different kind of threat, one from within. As the night wore on and the celebrations continued, Charlie and Ben began to formulate a plan to uncover the truth. In the shadows of the airfield, they vowed to protect their squadron at all costs, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Though they had emerged victorious from the day's battle, the fight for loyalty and honor had only just begun. The air was thick with tension as Charlie McGee and Ben Davis gathered their fellow Tuskegee Airmen in the dimly lit briefing room. The flickering overhead lights mirrored the unease that had settled over the squadron since whispers of betrayal began to circulate. Charlie stood at the front, his heart racing as he looked at the faces of the men he had come to consider brothers. Each one was a testament to the struggles they had faced, the victories they had achieved, and now, the shadows that loomed over them. "Listen up, everyone," Charlie began, his voice steady but firm. "We need to talk about what's been happening. I won't sugarcoat it. There's a leak in our ranks. Someone among us is feeding information to the enemy." A murmur swept through the room, eyes darting between each other with suspicion. Ben leaned forward, his brow furrowed. How do we know for sure? It could just be rumors. Charlie took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. I've seen things, details about our missions that shouldn't have left this room. I believe it's someone we trust. We can't afford to let this continue. Lives are at stake. Who do you think it is? One of the pilots, a young man named Walter, asked, his voice trembling slightly. I don't know yet, Charlie replied, but we need to keep our eyes open and gather evidence. If we don't act fast, we could lose everything we've worked for. As he spoke, Charlie felt the familiar burn of determination ignite within him. They had fought so hard to prove their worth, and now they were facing a betrayal that could shatter their brotherhood. The airmen nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the airfield, Charlie and Ben took to the skies in a training flight. The roar of the engines was a welcome distraction, the wind whipping around them as they maneuvered the aircraft through the clouds. But even as they soared, Charlie's mind was heavy with thoughts of the traitor among them. What if it's someone we've flown with? Ben asked as they circled back toward the airfield. What if it's someone we've trusted with our lives? Then we have to confront them, Charlie said, his tone resolute. I won't let fear dictate our actions. If someone is betraying us, they need to be held accountable. The next morning, as the airmen gathered for their briefing, Charlie's heart raced. He had been analyzing the clues, piecing together the patterns of information leaks. His gut told him that they were close to uncovering the traitor. He stood at the front of the room, scanning the faces of his comrades. I want to address something important, he began, his voice echoing in the tense silence. We need to be vigilant. I believe the traitor is among us, and I have reason to suspect that it's someone who has been with us since the beginning. Who? Ben interjected, a mix of urgency and apprehension in his voice. Charlie hesitated, then continued. I need you all to be aware of your surroundings. Keep your conversations private, and don't share mission details with anyone outside of this room. We'll figure this out together. As the meeting concluded, Charlie felt the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. He needed to gather more information and confront the traitor before their next mission. Ben walked beside him, concern etched on his face. Charlie, you're not in this alone, Ben said quietly. We're a squadron. We face everything together, even this. I appreciate that, Ben, Charlie replied, offering a small smile. But I need to protect our men. If I'm right about who the traitor is, this could get ugly. Ben nodded, the gravity of the situation sinking in. They spent the next few days on high alert, watching for any signs of betrayal. Tension simmered in the air, and the camaraderie that had once defined their unit felt strained. On the evening before their crucial mission, Charlie decided it was time to confront the pilot he suspected. The airfield was quiet, the moon casting a silver glow over the plains. Charlie found the pilot, a man named James, sitting alone in the mess hall, his eyes distant. James, Charlie said, his voice steady. Can we talk? James looked up, surprise flickering across his features. Sure, Charlie. What's on your mind? Charlie took a seat across from him, searching for the right words. I've noticed some discrepancies in our mission details, and I can't shake the feeling that someone is leaking information. I need to know where you stand. James hesitated, his expression shifting from surprise to defensiveness. What are you implying? That I'm the traitor. I'm not accusing you, but I need the truth, Charlie replied, keeping his tone calm. We're risking our lives out there, and I can't allow anyone to jeopardize that. Look, I'm just trying to do my job, just like everyone else. This pressure is unbearable, James said, frustration edging his voice. I'm not the one you should be looking at. Then help me understand, Charlie pressed. If you're on our side, prove it. We need to be united. There's too much at stake. James's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, Charlie saw a flicker of vulnerability. You don't know what it's like. People are watching me. They expect me to fail. I can't let them down. Then don't betray your brothers, Charlie urged, leaning forward. We're all in this together. We fight for each other, not against each other. Before James could respond, the alarm sirens blared, cutting through the tension like a knife. The mission was called, and the airmen scrambled into action. Charlie felt his heart race as adrenaline coursed through him. He shot a glance at Ben, who nodded in understanding. As they prepared for takeoff, Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying into a trap. The air was electric with anticipation, and the stakes had never been higher. He climbed into the cockpit, his mind racing with thoughts of loyalty and betrayal. Once in the air, the sky transformed into a battlefield. Enemy fighters swarmed, and Charlie's instincts kicked in. He maneuvered through the chaos, leading his squadron with precision. But as they engaged in combat, it became evident that their plans had been compromised. Enemy fighters seemed to know their every move, their formations falling apart under the onslaught. Charlie, they're everywhere, Ben shouted over the radio, his voice strained with urgency. Stay close, Charlie commanded, his resolve hardening. We need to regroup and outmaneuver them. But it was too late. The ambush was relentless, and Charlie's squadron suffered heavy losses. The weight of betrayal hung over him like a dark cloud, and each fallen comrade felt like a dagger to his heart. As they fought for survival, Charlie felt a fire ignite within him, a desperate need to uncover the truth and honor those who had fallen. Ben, we need to land and regroup, Charlie yelled, desperation creeping into his voice. As they maneuvered through the chaos, Charlie's thoughts raced. The traitor's actions had led them into this ambush, and he couldn't let it go unanswered. As they barely escaped the clutches of the enemy, the harrowing realization dawned on him. The fight for survival was now intertwined with the fight for justice. Amidst the chaos of war, the Brotherhood of the Tuskegee Airmen faced their greatest challenge yet. The betrayal of one threatened to unravel everything they had fought for, and in the heat of battle, Charlie knew he would stop at nothing to expose the truth and protect the legacy they had built together. In the aftermath of the disastrous mission, the airmen gathered in a dimly lit briefing room, the weight of loss heavy upon their shoulders. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words, tension crackling like static in the air. Charlie McGee stood at the front, his heart racing as he surveyed the faces of his brothers, each marked by their own grief and anger. They had fought valiantly, but the betrayal had cost them dearly. Gentlemen, Charlie began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. I know we faced unimaginable losses. We've lost friends, brothers, and our trust in one another has been shaken. He paused, looking at each man in the room. But we cannot let fear and betrayal define us. We are the Tuskegee Airmen. We've fought against the odds and proven our worth time and again. We have to confront the traitor among us, but we must do so with honor. Honor, Ben Davis interjected, his voice laced with frustration. How can we talk about honor when one of our own has put our lives in jeopardy? We need to confront him, Charlie. We deserve answers. I agree, came another voice from the back, a young pilot named Jesse. We need to know why he did it. What could possibly drive someone to betray their own squadron? Charlie nodded, feeling the weight of their expectations. We will confront him, but I ask each of you to remember that he is still one of us. We need to understand his motivations before we act. Anger will not heal our wounds. The men exchanged glances, some skeptical, others nodding in agreement. The room was filled with a palpable tension, the air thick with unresolved emotions. Charlie could see the pain in their eyes, the scars of betrayal etched deeply within their hearts. Later that evening, Charlie sought out the traitor, a fellow pilot named Harold. They met in a secluded corner of the airbase, the setting sun casting long shadows across the ground. As Charlie approached, he could see the fear and shame on Harold's face. Harold, Charlie began, his voice softer than he intended. We need to talk. Harold shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting away. I didn't want to. I was scared. Charlie, they threatened me. They said they'd take everything away from me. Who threatened you? Charlie pressed, his heart heavy with a mixture of anger and compassion. "The Colonel," Harold admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "He promised me a way out, a chance to save my family if I just gave him information." Charlie felt his heart sink. The Colonel had orchestrated this betrayal, exploiting Harold's fear for his own gain. "You put us all at risk, Harold. We lost good men because of your choices." I know, Harold cried, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I didn't think it would go this far. I thought I was helping. I thought I could protect my family. I was wrong, Charlie. I was so wrong." Charlie's heart ached for the man before him. They had all faced their battles, but not all had the strength to fight against the demons that haunted them. "You need to take responsibility for your actions. We can't just forget what happened, but I believe you can make this right." "Make it right." Harold's voice trembled. "How?" "They'll never trust me again." "We'll help you earn it back," Charlie said firmly. "But you have to be willing to fight for it. You have to confront the Colonel and tell the truth about what happened." Harold nodded slowly, the weight of his choices pressing heavily on him. "I'll do it, Charlie. I'll face him. I just don't want to lose my brothers." "You won't lose us if you're honest," Charlie reassured him. "We're all in this together." As the days passed, the airmen prepared for their next mission, but the specter of betrayal loomed over them. Tensions remained high, and Charlie could feel the uncertainty gnawing at the group. The atmosphere was thick with mistrust, but he was determined to bridge the gap. Finally, the day came when they would confront the Colonel. Charlie stood before his squadron, the determination in his eyes igniting a spark of unity among them. "Today, we face not just an enemy in the skies, but the man who has undermined our very existence. We will stand together as a united front. We will not let fear dictate our actions." Ben stepped forward, his voice strong. "We owe it to our fallen brothers to fight for the truth. This betrayal cannot go unanswered." As they marched towards the Colonel's office, nerves electrified the air. Charlie's heart pounded in his chest. He knew they were about to unearth dangerous truths that could shake the very foundation of their unit. "Colonel," Charlie called as they entered the office. The Colonel looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "What is the meaning of this, McGee?" the Colonel barked, his demeanor shifting from surprise to anger. "We need to talk about Harold," Charlie stated, his voice unwavering. "We know about the pressures you placed on him. We know you orchestrated this betrayal." The Colonel's expression hardened. "You're out of line, McGee. I've done what was necessary to ensure your unit's success." "Necessary?" Ben challenged, stepping forward. "You've put our lives at risk for your own agenda. You've sown division among us." "Enough!" the Colonel shouted, his face red with anger. "You are nothing but a group of glorified pilots. You think you can challenge me?" "Yes, we can," Charlie replied, his voice steady. "We've fought for our place in this war, and we will not be silenced by your fear tactics. The truth will come out." The tension in the room was palpable, the air electric with confrontation. The Colonel glared at them, but Charlie could see the unease beneath his bravado. "I won't stand for this insubordination," the Colonel warned. "Then we'll take this higher," Charlie declared, his heart swelling with the support of his brothers. "We will not allow fear and betrayal to dictate our fate any longer." As they left the Colonel's office, a newfound sense of unity enveloped the airmen. They had stood up for one another, ready to confront the injustices that plagued their unit. Charlie could feel the shift in the air, a renewed sense of purpose igniting within them. In the following days, they prepared for their next mission, but this time they were fueled by determination and camaraderie. The airmen stood together, united against the challenges they faced. On the day of the mission, Charlie delivered a powerful speech, his voice resonating through the ranks. "Today, we fight not just for victory, but for honor, loyalty, and the rights of every man in this squadron. We will not let fear define us. We are the Tuskegee Airmen, and we will prove our worth." As they soared through the skies, Charlie felt a sense of freedom and determination wash over him. They were no longer just pilots. They were warriors fighting for their legacy, united in their purpose. After a triumphant mission, they returned to base, greeted by cheers and applause. The airmen had finally earned the recognition they deserved, their bravery acknowledged by all. But amidst the celebration, Charlie knew the battle for equality was far from over. The colonel's actions had revealed the deeply rooted prejudices that still existed within their ranks. As they stood together, he realized they had not just fought for their place in the skies, but for the very soul of their nation. In that moment, Charlie felt a surge of hope. The Tuskegee Airmen were not just a unit. They were a movement, a symbol of resilience and courage. Together, they would continue to fight, not just against enemy forces, but for the rights of every man, woman, and child in America. As they looked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Charlie knew they would soar high, embodying the spirit of freedom and equality that they so fiercely believed in. The true battle was just beginning, but they would face it together, unyielding and unafraid.